All right, friends, it's T-Man, and we are back with a new video, and we're going to do a reaction video to this guy called T12J7. That's right. We're going to react to his video. He does arm wrestling. You know, I've posted some of his videos in my community section previously, so you've seen him. All right, we're going to react to his video. He says Isometric Strength Training Part 3, Static versus Dynamic. Okay.
Okay, let's talk about dynamic strength training for arm wrestling. So, like some people have said that strict curls are not good for arm wrestling and stuff like that, and in general that dynamic exercises are not that good for arm wrestling because arm wrestling is about isometric strength and not dynamic strength. But
yeah, it's mostly, if you're asking me my opinion, it's mostly isometric, eccentric strength. That's what it is. But it's mostly eccentric, okay? It's mostly, look, it's mostly based on strengthening, getting stronger muscles. How do you, here's the thing. How do you get stronger at lifting weights? Easy. You practice at lifting them, right? Now, whether it's getting practice lifting them at concentrically or eccentrically, that's called practice. Now, how do you get the muscle to be stronger, to be very strong? You've got to injure it. The more injuries that the muscle fibers incur, the more they will adapt by coming back stronger. You understand me, man? So isometric can be a form of, can get damaged. It can get damaged providing it's an isometric and there's something heavy pulling down on it, like a deadlift or one arm rows without rowing your arms, but very heavy weight rowing your back, which is a short range of motion, okay? So what is the advantage Larry Wheels has when he came into arm wrestling like Leonidas? Well, the two things, Alex Leonidas and this dude here, Larry Wheels, what was their advantage? Well, they deadlifted, right? So they have to have some isometric strength, but they do not have, that isometric still is damaging fibers. They'll come back a bit stronger. The muscles will come back stronger, but not as strong as a full eccentric exercise. You understand me? It will come back somewhat stronger, but not as strong as an eccentric exercise. That makes it even stronger.
couple of things about this topic, and my point in this video is just to make the point.
Look, I saw part of the video. You'll see. I'll prove it in this video, and so will he, that eccentric exercise will always be superior to concentric and isometric. Always.
That saying that dynamic training isn't good for arm wrestling might be jumping into conclusions, you know? Not that it's for sure is good for arm wrestling, but just the case for it not being good might not be that clearly against it, you know? So first of all, let's acknowledge the obvious.
Before we start, hold on. I'll tell you one more time. The most important thing to be strong in any sport is you having muscular strength, not necessarily lifting strength. Muscular strength is more important, especially in physical sports like arm wrestling. It's very important to have physical strength. That's why you see some big dudes lift weights, whatever, and maybe they're even on steroids. I don't know. And you see this guy, like recently, I saw him on YouTube, and he tried to fight with some, what was it? A sumo wrestler. Which this guy was a lot taller than the sumo wrestler and looked bigger, right? It was some black guy or something. It was, and the sumo wrestler, they were wrestling. The sumo wrestler, he had more weight on his body. He had more weight, more muscle, more weight. He fucking pushed that guy out. So more muscular strength, which is more important. More muscular strength is more important than just being good at lifting a weight or having an aesthetic look.
It is that many great arm wrestlers, like Rob Vigent Jr., has trained dynamically his biceps like he was.
Yeah, okay. And what modality is used to strengthen the muscle? Bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is what makes your muscles stronger. And if your muscles get stronger, guess what? You can destroy these people in arm wrestling. So you need to focus on getting stronger, not getting better at lifting a weight. Get it, dude? Get it?
Long time ago, almost only put out these type of videos where he was doing this standing bicep curl with one dumbbell, in which it was his variation of the strict curl.
Those are all useless. If they can't make your muscles stronger, they're useless. You understand me? It doesn't matter how much you can curl with that. And you're not going to be able to curl it with perfect form because you're weak. You're going to try throwing it up. It's going to go on your belly. You're going to try to throw it up isometrically like a lot of people do. But that's not causing damage in the isometric. The isometric there has to be tension on the isometric for a long period of time. And us eccentric lifters, we have more tension on our arms. Our limb muscles take on more tension, especially when we're doing our back exercises, because we are not rowing with our backs and we're using astronomically heavy weight. So it's so heavy that it's pulling on our arms because the back is a very short range of motion. So you're moving for reps, like 12 repetitions. That's a long time to hold a heavy weight. You can literally feel the tearing in the muscle fibers. You can see that, you can feel the splitting in the fibers. They're splitting. You can feel it.
And then Irakli does train the strict curl, Patso does train the strict curl. Dennis for sure trained the strict curl,
But it's meaningless. Dennis is out. He's on steroids. A lot of these people are on steroids. I don't know about the other people, but a good majority of them are on steroids in this sport. They don't test.
Not make me believe that Dennis just randomly decided to put out the world record on the strict curl without training for it, He had to
Of course he trained for it, but it's meaningless.
train for it to put out the record. It had to be some part of his training, in which case he was doing dynamic and isometrics together.
Everybody in arm wrestling, they lose to the eccentric overload. Once you overload them eccentrically, they lose because they're all training isometrically, concentrically. They don't train eccentrically. Well, some do, not all. Some intelligent ones. The guys from, Dagestan or wherever that fucking place is called. Georgia, from Georgia, like Sangashvili, these guys. They train eccentrically. But you guys, you just don't know that because you just, people don't understand. They don't get it. They just, in their head, they can't fathom, bro. Because eccentric exercise is associated with damage and DOMs and this and that. The recovery takes longer, so they don't like it. But that doesn't hold them back from doing it. See what I mean? That's why they're so dominant in the sport. Think about it. What is the most dominant exercise in the lifting world? You have isometric, concentric, and eccentric. Which one is the dominating exercise? Which one can you lift the heaviest? Which one makes your muscles stronger, bigger, and stronger? Which one? Eccentric. Can you lift heavier in the eccentric? Yes. Does it make your muscles bigger and make them much stronger? Yes. Does concentric do that? No. Does isometric do that? Well, it can, depending. It can a little bit, but not a lot. See what I mean? Not as much as eccentric. So there you go.
And then, let's not also forget these people, Larry Wheels and Leonidas. Like, why could these people just walk into arm wrestling?
Leonidas is weak. They're listen, man. They got regardless. They got beat. They're powerlifters. They got beat because they don't train eccentrically. They're weak. That's why they got beat, and they're still trying to get good at doing arm wrestling, and they're still not good. And every tournament that Larry Wheels turned up at, he lost, bro. They beat him. And this Leonidas guy's even weaker. Bullshit. Now, Alex Leonidas, he's lifting. He tried to take up arm wrestling. Is he good at arm wrestling? I don't know. Like I said, they come into these places, they try to arm wrestle people, but they still get beat, bro.
And start from very high level. Was it because they both have over 100 kilo strict curl? Why could Larry just walk into arm wrestling and start from the very high level?
Yeah. But he got beat at the high level when he tried to walk in there against everybody when he started. It was embarrassing. You understand me? And he knew it. He was getting beat all the time, and he still got beat to this day. He's having a hard time.
What in his strength capacity?
Think about it. Why do you think he's taking up bodybuilding? Because he knows there's no future in what do you call it? Powerlifting, bro. There's no future for be powerlifting for the rest of your life. You think so? Man.
Allowed him to do it because he for sure was not training isometrics before he started arm wrestling. But he had 105 kilo strict curl.
He trains concentrically, so he doesn't train to build his muscles stronger. Physically get stronger. He's bigger. He looks big, but that's not myofibular growth. That's sarcoplasmic. That's just what it get. That's steroid. It gives you a cosmetic look, an aesthetic, fake cosmetic look. You understand me? But the hormones themselves binding to the androgen receptor is what gives you maximal force production. PubMed, myocytic androgen receptor controls the strength, but not the mass of the limb muscles. What controls the mass of the limb muscles? Well, he's, full stat, myostat, satellite cell, and muscle damage. Get it, dude?
So again, and Leonidas has 100 kilo strict curl. So saying the dynamic exercises would be worthless, to me, is jumping into conclusions. Because we have this kind of evidence. Evidence of arm wrestlers doing it, high-level arm wrestlers doing it, and evidence of powerlifters doing it, and who just transferred to arm wrestling and started from very high level. Yes, Larry Wheels couldn't defeat the schoolboy, but schoolboy was a champion. You wouldn't expect somebody who just started arm wrestling to defeat the schoolboy.
Yeah,
but Larry
Wheels can deadlift 1,000 pounds, and schoolboy can't. So why did schoolboy beat Larry Wheels? Why?
Started from the very high level. Why? Because he was doing just dynamics. If dynamics are worthless for arm wrestling, why did Larry Wheels start from the high level? And why?
I don't know, because they dragged him in the very high level. That's why they just put him in there to train against other people, because they look at his size and what he could do in lifting, in the lifting world. Yet he lost in the high level, okay? He lost everybody.
Did Leonidas start from the high level? If dynamics are worthless.
And he lost, too.
And then let's consider also this.
Because it's worthless.
Isometric strength is always higher than concentric strength. You cannot.
Of course it is, because it's causing your muscles to become stronger. It's causing them to split. See what I mean? If you're holding onto a heavy weight like a deadlift with both arms, you're holding onto, 600-700 pounds, and it's fucking. You're holding on to it. It's pulling on your muscles, your back area, your shoulders, and your arms. So they cause fiber splitting. Not a lot, but eventually it'll adapt by how? How will it adapt? Be becoming stronger so that it doesn't get any more micro tears. So it becomes stronger now, right? There's no more micro tears. So when you're in a competition, you're not going to get micro torn in an episode where they pull your arm in the isometric. You're not going to get these micro tears. It'll weaken you, because if you do, it'll weaken you and you'll lose your fucking match. Now, if you're unaccustomed to doing these eccentric exercise, and some guy is accustomed to doing eccentric exercise, and he has strengthened his muscles, when he pulls you eccentrically down, right? Pulls you up, down, curve, down, boom, eccentrically, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get some micro tears, and you're going to lose in that match. And then you're going to lose match after match to him, because now you're in a weakened state, because micro tears make you in a fucking weakened fucking state. Get it, dude? Get it, man?
It says the reality that the isometric strength is always higher than the concentric strength, meaning then that it has to be so, that if the concentric strength increases, so does the isometric strength maximum. Other way around, there might be a gap. If you just do isometrics, the concentrics might lag behind, meaning that this isometric point, if you just train for it, might get here. In which case this graph goes like this. But if you train these concentrics, you might get this kind of effect.
You get no muscular. You get no muscular strength in concentric. It's a shortening. It's the shortening part. Shortening doesn't lengthen. It doesn't cause micro tears. Shortening it.
To increase the isometric maximum also. Maybe not so greatly as if just training isometrics, but because these exist in this kind of continuum, meaning that the line here never breaks. and the isometrics is always higher than the concentrics, then it has to be that there is a connection. You
I
cannot.
like how he put there, it said velocity. The velocity is always higher in the eccentric than even isometric. Isometric is great, but eccentric will always be king. Will always be king for building muscular strength.
Escape this reality that they are connected. You cannot escape it. They are always connected. And the
course they're
isometric is
connected.
always higher than the concentric. Meaning then that if Larry Wheels, strict girls, 100 kilos,
Yeah, they're always connected. But the moment somebody pulls your arm out eccentrically and you're weak in the eccentric and you get some micro damages in your arm, they pull so hard on it, they give you an eccentric overload. If you're overloaded to the point where you were unaccustomed to that overload, whatever that overload is coming, and you're unaccustomed to that overload in that arm wrestling match, you'll get micro tears in there and you'll lose your match to that guy overloading you. Get it? That's what's going to happen. Because why? Because unaccustomed exercise is known to cause what? Widespread muscle damage. And what's associated with muscle damage? Weakness, pain, range of motion, and all of that. Get it, dude? That's what happens. You get weak when you get micro tears in the competition. That's how people lose in competitions. Get it, man? You understand me? If the load is higher and you're not accustomed to that load, then bang, you're going to get micro tears. You're going to lose in the match automatically.
his isometric will be even stronger than that. All right? Then also, oftentimes people make the argument that somebody who had strong biceps and had trained for biceps still lost in arm wrestling. You know, people oftentimes make.
Of course. Want to know why? Because they got these micro tears. They pulled them, they gave them the overload, eccentric overload, and bang, they lost. Get it? They were unaccustomed to that load, and they got injured. Unfamiliar forms, unaccustomed, untrained people get this damage, and then bang, they're dead. You get it, dude? So what's a unique feature of eccentric exercise? That untrained subjects become stiff and sore the next day due to what? Muscle damage. All right? So if you get in a competition, you've lost.
This argument. But this is the reality with it. Specialization loses to well.
I can prove it in all the videos, even in the table 14. I can show you a guy, even what's his name, Matt Mask, lost to Nugo, whatever his name is, right away when he pulled him out. He got injured. He got micro injuries, and he lost set after set after set. And so did that Todd guy. Michael Todd, he lost too because he got these micro injuries because he's stupid. He had some guy overloading him eccentrically, and then he overloaded himself with his own body weight. How dumb is that?
Roundedness. Let's take another example. Let's say that the person only trains pronation. This person only trains leg pronation. He doesn't train bicep. He doesn't train side pressure. He doesn't train any other arm wrestling strength. He just trains pronation. And then he loses. Does that mean that pronation is worthless?
Yes, it's worthless. You understand me? It was worthless. He should have trained eccentrically because he would have been automatically good at pronation.
And you shouldn't train the pronation? Does
No.
that mean that? No!
Yes, I disagree with you. He should have trained eccentrically. He would have been good. If you train eccentrically, it's already automatically incorporated in concentric and isometric. It's already there. You're already good at both of them.
It means specialization loses to well-roundedness. All right?
Whatever.
The same thing here. Even though somebody would be
disagree.
bicep
I disagree.
specialist, they might still lose. Not because
Experience tells me no. That's what my experience tells me. No, you're wrong.
bicep dynamic strength of the bicep is worthless, but because specialization loses.
You're wrong because I can disprove everything that you say with science. You want to know why? Because this is what happens when they get pulled eccentrically. Feature of eccentric. Unaccustomed eccentric exercise, especially lengthening muscle contractions, is known to cause widespread muscle damage. This damage is characterized by structural changes, inflammation, increased proteolytic enzyme activity, leading to decreased muscle force production and delayed onset muscle soreness, of course, the next day. But a decrease in force production, and that's why they lose. You understand me? Summary, extreme, listen to the word, extreme or unaccustomed, eccentric. When somebody pulls you eccentrically, get it? Like in a competition, you get an overload. Can cause exercise-induced muscle damage, characterized by structural changes involving sarcomere, cytoskeletal, and membrane damage with an increased permeability of sarcolemma from proteins. So if you look up like a section there, you're weakened, bro. You lost force production right away. You're weakened. You're in a weakened state. You're fucked. Okay, you're fucked in the competition, and that's what happens to a lot of these people.
Loses to well-roundedness. So first point being that dynamic strength has to be correlating with the isometric strength because the isometric is always greater than the dynamic.
No, you have to train. You have to train for eccentric exercise. You have to train to the point where your muscles are now accustomed. They're accustomed to some guy trying to pull you out so you don't get any micro damages. You understand me? In other words, you have to strengthen your muscles. How do you get your muscles stronger? By damaging them. If they're not damaged, they will not get stronger. Okay, dude? And they rapidly adapt to your exercises, especially full range of motion. They're not getting any stronger. All right, they might get bigger, but that doesn't make them stronger because they got bigger from sarcoplasmic fluid.
And the second point being that you cannot conclude that if somebody who has specialized strength, for example in the bicep, loses, that therefore the thing that they had was worthless for arm.
They don't have specialized strength. They never built any muscle. They never got physically stronger. They didn't build any muscle. They took steroids. They increased the sarcoplasm. It's aesthetic. And they lift concentrically against gravity, bro. Get it? It's a shortening the muscle. Shortening. Not lengthening.
Because if one would specialize in strength, which we know is important for arm wrestling, they would still lose without the other strengths. That's only.
Not if they specialize in eccentric exercise, they would not ever lose, ever.
Thing that you can take away from it, if somebody who is specialized for bicep strength loses, is that it does not mean that the bicep is worthless. It means that specialization loses to well-roundedness. All right?
Okay,
Then let's go to the grip world. All right. Many people also make the case that the grippers, the tick handles, and the dynamometer are different and their strength in them does not correlate. They also make this kind of comparison. But consider that in the grippers, this is the hardest position in the gripper, meaning your fist is pretty closed. And the gripper only trains the fingers. And that it is a high skill thing.
You can train your fingers eccentrically as well. You can get these metal handles, like the handles that you're using to do pulls and shit in the gym. You just hold them in your hand and you let them roll down eccentrically. You let them roll down to the bottom of your fingertips eccentrically. Very, very heavy loads. And then you bring them up slightly, you bring it up slightly, and you bring it down again in the eccentric. That's it. You stay in the eccentric part, bring it down, bring it up again.
These grippers are high skill. When you see those elite gripper guys close these grippers.
The thumb, you're going to have to do it separately. The thumb, you have to do them separately because, man, the thumb, you're going to have to hold something there and just keep doing it back and forth eccentrically as well.
They have a very particular mechanism how they set the gripper up, how they do everything with the gripper, how they place their pinky finger, in what crack and fold they put everything in that gripper. So when a person who has never tried the gripper, even though they would have put out good numbers on the dynamometer, if they try the gripper without knowing any techniques of the gripper, they might perform poorly because the gripper is a high skill thing. You have to acknowledge it. Yeah. And then, what if the gripper guy, who is very good at the gripper, tries the rolling tick handle and fails in it, or is not phenomenal in it? Note that the rolling tick handle also requires thumb strength and wrist strength, none of which is trained with the gripper. So if the gripper guy fails with the rolling tick handle, Was it because their fingers were weak due to the gripping with the gripper, or was it because their thumb and wrist are underdeveloped? You know? So you cannot take this comparison for the just saying, I was good at this and then I weren't great in this and therefore this doesn't transfer. And then this device. It also trains the fingers, but it is slow skill. A lot less skill is required with this device than with the gripper. So even though you would put out good numbers with this, it doesn't then automatically mean that you should be able to be great at the grippers. You know, because the gripper, again, is a high skill thing. If you are comparing your numbers to the elite people who close these grippers, they have a very particular thing what they do with the gripper when they close it. So if you just walk in it and do it, like expect to perform poorly without some kind of strategies and technique. Like it's the same as if you are good at deadlift and then you try some of those Olympic lifts, like the clean and jerk and stuff like that. Obviously, you cannot do very much on them because
It's kind of obvious, yeah. It doesn't work because it's not transferable. But bodybuilding, you can carry that to any sport. See what I mean? Bodybuilding, because it makes you physically stronger. You're getting physically muscles stronger. Get it, bro? So it's a carryover to weightlifting, deadlifting, every kind of fucking sport.
they are high skill activity.
The only problem is people don't understand bodybuilding. They don't know that it's based on eccentric exercise to build your muscles stronger. To build muscle, myofibrillar growth, it's based on eccentric exercise, not based on full range of motion, lifting, going to the gym 5 days a week, volume lifting and all that. That's going to be sarcoplasmic. That's aesthetic. Aesthetic looks, lifting in the gym for aesthetics is not a carryover to sports. Get it? That's why they call it aesthetics. Get it? They're like, I'm going to the gym because I want to get an aesthetic look. Oh, okay. Good luck with that. But that's not bodybuilding. Aesthetics is not bodybuilding. I think people are confused out there.
Okay. Then another thing with the dynamic things and isometric things, which is the many people have this weird idea about the dynamic things and the isometric things, in which they just think about that they are different. That the world exists so that the concentric and isometrics are separate things. But this is not the case.
We know they're not separate. They're all one.
Because it's just in your head, kind of. Because there is the eccentric viewpoint. Meaning that many of the things which are categorized.
And notice eccentric is on the top. Why? Because eccentric is superior to concentric and isometric. It's superior. What makes it superior? Because there's muscle gains there. Superior when it comes to muscle gains. Look, they all work together. Somewhat. They work together. But the eccentric is what gives you greater muscle gains and strength. You understand me? See what I mean? The concentric can't totally escape the eccentric, and neither can the isometric. They cannot escape the eccentric. But eccentric itself will give you greater gains than if it's confined or imprisoned by isometric or concentric. You understand me? That's the difference. Now, we're imprisoned. When we're rowing with our back, we're using our arm in the isometric without rowing our arm. We're just rowing our back eccentrically because the range of motion is short. But it's going to be imprisoned. You understand me? By what? Isometric. So the way you move these objects are specific. You understand me? Not that isometric is bad. You're going to get some stuff there. Better to get some than nothing. I would say eccentric is first, then it would come isometric, then concentric.
As either concentric or isometrics, from the viewpoint of eccentrics, can be also categorized as just different methods of eccentrics. You know?
Yeah.
For example,
Yeah, I agree with him.
maximal dynamic work can be just categorized as a subtype of eccentric training. Failed and maximal isometric things, in which there is an eccentric component, can be also categorized as a subtype of eccentrics. As well as seat movements and failed and maximal dynamic movements, they also have eccentric component strongly in them, and hence they also are a subtype of eccentric training. So note that this dichotomy between the concentric and isometrics is only in your head. Because if we take the eccentric viewpoint, then they become many of the activities that you think are concentric or isometric becomes as subtypes of eccentric training. Meaning that if somebody...
Yeah, but the eccentric takes up more of the space if you're still doing the concentric isometric. In eccentric training, we don't really do isometric or concentric training. We stop at the isometric and go back down with the eccentric. We go up eccentrically and down eccentrically. And a lot of it could be just down eccentrically, accentuated, going down eccentrically. See what I mean? Without any of that. So, yeah, the only reason some parts are imprisoned by the isometric is because our back, we're holding the object with our arm. And it's so heavy that it's a small range of motion in our back area. So we're just moving our back and letting it pull the back out again. That's all. The range of motion is short for back. We don't want to work our arms, but our arms are going to get isometric, which will cause some fiber splitting in there because the weight is astronomically heavy, pulling on our arms isometrically. And people who deadlift get isometrics as well.
Is doing submaximal dynamic things, or they are doing maximal isometric things, they can be, from the viewpoint of eccentric training, be categorized as just one type of eccentric training, in which they are not doing categorically different things, but they are doing a different variation of eccentric training. You know? For example...
I'll just put it this way. If you're mixing them up, the concentric, isometric, eccentric, concentric, then you will always be poor. You'll always lose. You'll always be a failure. Now, if you leave out the concentric, isometric, and just do the eccentrics, that's where you're going to win in all your sports. Get it? Because it takes up a higher volume here at the top. So it must be superior, like science says in PubMed. PubMed explains to you the superiority of eccentric exercise when it comes to concentric and even isometric. Okay, dude? So, yeah, it's just like that.
Is handled. If you fail to do maximal weight with this, which has an eccentric component, it could be seen as just a subtype of eccentric training. And as with this too, it can also be seen as a subtype of eccentric training. So in this viewpoint, the reality would be that they are just different things in the mega category of eccentric training. Okay, so that is the eccentric.
Yes, you can lift very heavy isometrically, but the movement is restricted by the isometric because now it cannot move between eccentric and concentric because it's confined to isometric. Get it, dude? But eccentric is not confined to the isometric nor the concentric. It can unleash its full power, its full potential. So you can lift heavier and you can do reps. You can rep them out so that they get more micro tears in them. The more you rep them, the more micro tears they get, the more the muscle will adapt by coming back bigger and stronger. Get it, dude? Now, I'm not talking stronger like they got stronger, they're good now, lifting a weight concentrically against gravity. No, they come back stronger that a heavy weight cannot cause them to become damaged, and then you lose in your competition. Get it? So you understand what I'm trying to explain to you? That's different. There's force production, and then there's getting bigger, stronger muscles. So you win in competitions.
Viewpoint. But let's then talk about a couple of words about this area, where the concentric and isometric overlap. So now we are talking about just this white and whatever color this is area. So let's look at a couple of examples in which this activity appears. So look at the cheat girls here in the upper row. Here are a couple of frames of the cheat girl.
Yeah, they're holding the weight isometrically and they're cheating. They're holding it. Look at the guy at the bottom there. He holds it isometrically and he brings it up. He's using his body. He's not using his arms.
Look at this arm angle. How it is isometric here, and then it starts to do a concentric construction. All right? So these kind of cheat girls are in between isometrics and concentrics. All right? And then when you lower it down, then there is an eccentric component also. But then let's look at this, what the strongman do. Here, in the beginning, the arm angle is this. But it says pretty much the same for the entire duration of this push from the legs. Meaning that since he is speeding up this thing with the legs, the arm has to hold that isometrically, this angle. Because note that this end of the dumbbell is not supported by anything. He's only supporting the dumbbell with his shoulder from this side. Like this end of the dumbbell is supported by the shoulder, but not this end. This end of the dumbbell has to be supported by the hand and the forearm and the arm, you know? So it is doing an isometric hold here for the speeding process. And then it is doing this concentric motion, you know, with the help of the momentum it gained from this isometric hold.
Okay.
And the leg drive. So this is also in between realm of the concentric and isometric activity, you know? So it's, again, not that so black and white when we look at this situation. Like this box, there is many things that belong to it. And then let's look at the couple of other things, like the rope climbing. When people wonder why the calisthenics people are so good at arm wrestling, note that in this transition when the arm is chained.
Calisthenic people are so good at arm wrestling because they're causing micro damage because they lift eccentrically, bro. Get it?
The arm, which is holding the rope, is doing an isometric hold. You know? This arm angle doesn't change.
Yes, there's some isometric, but then it becomes eccentric. Because look at all the body, look at their body on the limb muscles. All that body has, the little limb muscles have to support that body weight, bro. Get it? But eventually it adapts. How? By getting stronger, getting micro tears and getting stronger.
When the arm is changed, arm switches place. It's an isometric hold in which you are holding your entire body weight on this rope. So it's again, is the rope climbing, is it dynamic or isometric? Is this activity totally concentric?
It's eccentric, isometric. It's eccentric, isometric. It's kind of obvious.
Or is it isometric? Yeah, it's a mix of them.
No, it's not concentric. It's fuck. You could say it's kind of a mix of it, but it's more eccentric, isometric. Yeah, it's more eccentric.
You know? And then let's look at my activity here with this kind of cheating push down. Not that when it is in this position where the arm angle is closed. It's the same thing.
Okay, that would be considered concentric, but it becomes eccentric when it's pulling back. If it pulls back, it becomes eccentric, but it's concentric. You're pressing.
Thing happens here as with when the strongman do the dumbbell push thing, which we looked already. The same here happening here. I'm isometrically holding this arm angle and using my body to give the stag speed. And then only after it has gained the speed, I do the concentric portion, you know? So again, this is a mix of isometrics and concentrics, you know? So there exists a lot of exercises which are kind of mix of concentric.
He's funny. Oh, it's a mix of isometric and concentric. No, it's a mix of eccentric, isometric, and concentric in that movement. Get it? But your eccentric is adapted. Now, if you want to get stronger in the eccentric, then you should have stayed there in the eccentric and stop pushing for the concentric.
And isometric. So again, if there would be a study which would look only these type of exercises and look at their carryover to isometrics and concentrics, the result of that study would be a lot different than comparing just purely concentric movements and meaning purely dynamic movements, which are eccentric and concentric, to isometrics. You know, the result of that study would be a lot different than the dynamic versus isometric, because these ones had huge components of isometrics. All right. So again, this is not so black and white. This thing, like most people.
Look, man, if these two things are inferior, concentric and isometric to eccentric, if they are inferior to, if concentric and isometric is inferior to eccentric, then what is the course of action? Eccentric. Why? Because they're inferior to eccentric. Get it? Like PubMed says. So just do eccentric exercises. Why waste your time with doing concentric or isometric? See, that's the problem with a lot of these people. They lack experience. They can't see it or visualize it or understand what the fuck eccentric exercise does. It makes you physically stronger and good and better at lifting heavier too as well. Okay, dude? It gives you force production. It also gives you fucking muscle. It makes your muscles strong like steel.
Make it out to be. And therefore, this kind of validates, in my opinion, this kind of cheating workouts, because the cheating is usually coming from isometrics. And weren't isometrics the thing that arm wrestling was supposed to train, you know? So it's a little bit odd to me at times when people who even practice arm wrestling think that cheating is bad and you should do it, aka strict. But not that the cheating means that there is now mix of isometrics and concentrics, you know? I would argue that this category is far more valuable to arm wrestling than purely concentric category, you know? I'm not taking away anything from the concentrics, but just saying that when people criticize usually this category
Eccentric is a waste of time because you could lift heavier in the eccentric and it will make your muscles stronger.
activity, they should understand that how can you criticize this category when you are validating this category and this category? You think that isometrics are a valid way to train, and you think that concentrics are a valid way to train. But then somehow, when you mix them both, it becomes bad. Can you explain to me why mixing up two ingredients which are good on their own into one makes it suddenly bad? All right? So
All right,
note
brother.
that only this activity, the dynamometer, falls outside the category of eccentric training. And all of these other things, cheat reps, this kind of dynamic thing, and the maximal isometric things where there is an eccentric component in it, these can all be put into the category of eccentric training and not seen as either concentric or isometrics.
No, it can't be put in the eccentric unless it causes a level of damage. If it doesn't cause you any damage, then it's not eccentric. Then this is isometric. If you're grabbing that thing, that's isometric. It becomes eccentric when the fingers unravel. It's isometric because he's holding it with his hand. He's holding these things. Now, this thing here on the left, he's opening and closing. That would be concentric, eccentric, but the eccentric is too light. You understand me? It's too light. But whatever, man. And this thing here in the middle, that is isometric, him rowing that thing, the barbell. It's garbage.
No, they could just be seen as subtypes of eccentrics. This excluded because it's immune to eccentrics. So, note that this
It's immune to the eccentric. Man, this guy's funny. You're holding the thing was isometric, and that being immune to the eccentric because you're good at the concentric and the eccentric has adapted.
kind of dynamic and isometrics, it's just a language term. It's just philosophical categorization. Because all of this activity could as well, as you can see here, there is an eccentric.
Isometric. He's pulling that weight up, but his arm is completely straight. He lifted it up off the floor about 3 inches or something. I don't know. And this dead hang is isometric. Dead hangs are isometric. Yeah. Will they cause fiber splitting? Yes. Will they cause a lot? Not really. Will it adapt to your body weight? Yes. So what do you need to do? You need to add weight. You do more dead hangs, adding more weight. That's what you do. See what I mean? I know a lot of people that do isometrics. I know some people, they do isometrics. They do isometrics on a lot of things. A lot of people don't understand isometrics. They're not familiar with it, so they wouldn't understand it. People in eccentric who lift eccentrically, they will get isometrics, especially rowing their back, because you're not using your arms.
There's an eccentric there. They could be just seen as a subtypes of eccentrics. All right, so moving on. That these things don't, that there is reasoning why they wouldn't correlate outside the realm work of it doesn't train the same.
Look, even doing rear delts, we're not using our arms. We're using our delts and we're moving very heavy weight. And our side delts, the same thing. We're pulling a very heavy weight with our side delt. Our arm is just holding it isometrically. So we get a lot of isometrics in the limb muscles. You understand me? We get a lot.
Things as the other. You know, it's not so clear and cut case that this is the only conclusion to come from it. As well,
Okay.
here the point being that the concentric and isometric reality, them being the only things that you can categorize things as, fails to recognize that many of the activities can be just seen as subtypes of eccentrics, in which they are in the same mega category of eccentric training.
Okay,
all right?
whatever.
So, then let's next look at some of the studies and what they conclude. 2 meta-analyses on which look this kind of thing, which we are talking about. And what does this conclude? There is strong evidence that isometric and dynamic strength present separate neuromuscular domains. All right? Then here.
Okay.
The limited transferability of dynamic strength to non-trained isometric constructions suggests that these two strengths outcomes represent different neuromuscular domains. All right, so these conclude the same thing. that they seem to belong on the different neuromuscular domains. But here is the reality of what the people in these studies mostly did. Let's look at the flaws in the reasoning here.
Yeah.
If you go to and look what the most of the shit they did was, they were doing stuff like comparing a deadlift to an isometric mid-thigh pull. Deadlift being this activity and the isometric mid-thigh pull being this activity. You know?
Yeah, that's isometric. That would be isometric. Yeah.
Now consider it. Do you think that if you would train this isometric hold position, it would make you stronger in the deadlift? Think about it. This is not the sticking point in the deadlift. And
I know that. It makes you stronger, especially if you use eccentrics with the isometric going down with the weight.
as we already know from this book and this image, when the isometric training is done in the mid-range of the joint, it usually strengthens all the joint angles. But when it is done in either of the hyperextended position, meaning the mostly straight joint position, or in the fully constructed position, it doesn't transfer that well to the mid-range or above it, to the other side. You know, it just strengthens the area that it is trained, which is not the case when the training is done in the mid-range. All right? Then consider this isometric mid-thigh pull. Is it mid-range training or is it in the hyperextended position or in the fully constructed position? I would categorize that in this. The joints are almost straight. In which case it's not this mid-range isometric training, and hence you wouldn't expect this to strengthen all the joint angles. And note also that in the deadlift, you would not expect the deadlift to that much strengthen this position, because this is not the hardest position in the deadlift. It's usually separating the bars from the floor and getting over your knees, which is the hardest thing in the deadlift, not this. So if doing deadlifts did not strengthen this, then does it then mean that dynamic strength training does not correlate with isometric strength training? To isometric strength. No, it means that you were comparing apple and oranges. So you cannot ever forget the incompetence of these people. Like, they were
Yes.
training with
I
this.
know that. It makes no sense. It's like these people doing those crazy, rack pulls, those crazy rack pulls, man. It's ridiculous. Okay.
And then testing it with this. This is not the hardest position in the deadlift. You wouldn't expect the deadlift to strengthen this maximally. You should have done this below the knees. Then you would have a better comparison. Does the deadlift correlate to isometric strength training? Or does the deadlift correlate with isometric strength in the hardest position of the deadlift for the isometrics? You know? You are comparing apple and oranges here, and you are violating already known.
I don't know. Once you lift the weight, where's all the stress? In your back and your legs, right? There's still stress in your arms. And if you stand up with it, where's all the stress now? In your limb muscles. So it's not in your back or your legs anymore. So is he kind of wrong? Yes, in a way he's wrong. Because if you've grabbed the weight standing like in a squat, that or deadlift position, right? You're up holding the weight. In other words, if you're doing it, let's say you're doing it and you're holding it in a rack pull. So you grab a rack pull, a heavy weight like what you were about to do there, but you don't pull it up. All the stress is in your back and your legs to deadlift, really. But the stress in the arms is to hold the weight. So he's talking about isometric. If it's isometric that you want, doing the same weight, yes, it will give you the same outcome. But it will not make your back or legs stronger lifting it, because you're not lifting it with your back and your legs.
Science that the fully open position isometric strength training doesn't strengthen all the joint angles. You should have done the isometric training in a mid-range position to give any type of conclusion. Does the isometric strength training then carry over to the dynamic strength and vice versa? This is comparing apples and oranges. So,
But what if it's the same weight? See what I mean? What if it's the same weight and you hold it for a longer period of time at the top before you lower it? So who's getting more benefits? Let's say this guy holds it for 2 minutes at the top, 500 pounds. Meanwhile, the guy who picked it up, 500 pounds, he picks it up, holds it for a couple of seconds and drops it. But you're holding it there for over a minute, over 1 minute. Like if you're holding it for 1 minute and he only picked it up for about 10, I don't know, 8 seconds and then he dropped it, who gets more benefits? The guy who holds it isometrically for a full minute or the guy who fucking picked it up for 8 seconds and dropped it? Who gets the benefit? The guy who holds it for 1 minute. So it doesn't make any sense here.
Because of these kind of huge flaws in this whole system. Like, take what you want from this, but
The longer you hold it, the more chances there will be fiber splitting in those arms. You understand me? The more fiber splitting. So the more eccentric exercise that I do, the more repetition work in the eccentric, the more micro damages I get, the more I'll get a repair and remodeling of the extracellular matrix, making me stronger. Get it? If I don't do a lot, then I get a little bit. If I do more, I get more. Get it? You understand me? If I do more, I get more. See what I mean? If I eat more, I get more too as well, right? See, you understand how it works, bro? Yeah.
for me, the data is still inconclusive.
Oh,
Obviously,
whatever.
I'm not saying that I challenge here that therefore you shouldn't do isometric strength training if you want to get strong isometrically. Obviously, you should, but I'm saying I'm challenging here the notion that dynamic strength training is.
The question is, how long can you hold it there isometrically? Look, people in the past, when they had to go out and fight with people, they had a sword. The sword was very heavy. They had to train to stab, like, I don't know, they had like a tree, and they would stab that tree repetitively until they could not stab anymore. And why can't they stab anymore? Because they got some micro damages in their arms from all that stabbing. Get it? And now they've lost the range. They've lost force production, and so they have to give a chance for the arm to adapt by getting stronger and more endurance. And they'll get more endurance at the same time because you're doing it a lot more, and you're gonna get these micro damages. Get it? So when you go out in a fight and you start stabbing people, right? You don't want to get these micro damages in the fight where you're stabbing, because you'll be stabbed. Get it? You won't be able to move your arm. Your arm will just lock up, freeze, and then that's it. You won't be able to stab anymore. People usually lose in these warriors. They lose in these sword fights and shit when they're fighting with swords and shit and all that, because they lost force production, because they were unaccustomed. As soon as they hit that unaccustomed range, boom, they get these micro tears and they get weakened, and then they lose, and then they get stabbed and they die. Get it? Only the strong survive and the weak die. So how do you get stronger? Easy. Get stronger. Get more micro tears so you become accustomed to it. So then every time you're a lot stronger. Get it? Yeah, dude.
Worthless for isometric strength. That's what I'm challenging and raising questions about. And pointing out that let's not jump into conclusions here.
Here's the question. What will make you stronger in the isometric in an arm wrestling match? The longer you can hold a heavy weight, like some dead weight in the isometric, the longer you can hold it, the more chances you may have to win. Get it? I say eccentric is superior, but the longer you can hold that isometric hold without anybody being able to pull your arm down or anything or whatever. See what I'm trying to explain to you? Endurance and holding it there without anybody causing these micro injuries, you'll win. You should be able to win the match. You should be able to outmatch that person. You see what I mean? So the longer you hold an isometric, let's say the person weighs, I don't know, maybe you're dealing with a guy that weighs 160 pounds, maybe 250, 260, whatever, 230, I'm not sure, whatever that weight is. So that's the weight that you want to practice for before you go for the match. Before you go for the match, you have time to practice. So now start practicing with that guy's body weight. You're holding it. Go a little bit over his body weight, though. You go a little bit, maybe 10, 15 pounds over his body weight, and practice holding it isometrically. Okay, if that's what you really want to do. Me personally, I think you should get strong in the eccentric. That's all, and you'll overcome any of these obstacles. It's just a waste of time, isometric and concentric. Okay, dude, that's based on my experience and opinion, and science tells me that, because superior to concentric, isometric, eccentric exercise. Okay, so why fuck with that shit?
So that's what we get from the studies. But again, this reality never is violated. that the isometric strength is always greater than the concentric strength. You know? Even this considered, this reality cannot change. But then, let's now recognize the true reality, which is this. This person, the red hand, trains isometric biceps. The green hand trains isometric bicep training and dynamic bicep training together. He does them both. This purple hand trains isometric bicep training, dynamic bicep training, and ballistic bicep training. He does them all in his strength training program. And the blue hand trains the isometric bicep training, dynamic bicep training, ballistic tricep training, and Abraham bicep training. Yeah, he does them all. The Abraham bicep training, meaning the Abraham protocol we have talked about previously in the...
But he's done 0 eccentric, so he's gonna lose. Because if he pull him in the eccentric, he's gone. Okay, dude.
Series on isometric training, which is the sub-maximal training, which I done daily. The 40% of one repetition maximum holds. He does them all. So...
But you just said he didn't do any eccentric, so he's gonna lose.
Even though the dynamic bicep training does not that well correlate with the isometric bicep training, does it then mean that you shouldn't include it in your strength training program? Meaning then, does it mean that the red hand here performed better than the green hand? And does it then mean that you should do what the red hand is doing? Or is it settled science that this hand wouldn't still be the strongest? Who does all these training methods? Not saying that these are all there can be, just giving some examples of different ways to train.
Yeah, okay.
For strength. You know? So, the conclusion of this video, and my thesis here, is not that it is wrong that the dynamic strength does not that well correlate to isometric strength. I'm not challenging or trying to disprove it, but I am noting out that let's not jump into conclusions here. Because this type of situation is very different what these studies looked at, where there was just isometric or just dynamic, and they looked how well they correlates. This kind of situation is much more typical to strength training programs, where things are mixed up and different neuromuscular mechanisms are added to the training. All right?
Yeah.
And this also is not that well clear cut that because I was bad at this, but I'm good at this. Therefore, these wouldn't correlate to any other thing than what it is doing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just pointing out that let's not jump into conclusions. Also with the concentric strength and isometric strength dichotomy, let's not jump into conclusion because many of the things that are categorized as either isometric or concentric can be just categorized as eccentric training, in which they are the same thing, eccentric training. All right? And let's not ignore the reality that many great arm wrestlers train the striker and are good arm wrestlers.
But they don't train eccentrically. They don't.
Dennis being an example of the elite arm wrestler in this realm, who did train the striker. And these guys who just walk into arm wrestling having a great striker and seem to be that they dominated in arm wrestling because just the striker. Maybe the bench press also, but you know, both only meaning that they have only done dynamic training. Because the dynamic training does raise the isometric strength. Not as much maybe than specialized isometric training, but nevertheless, if you can striker 100 kilos, there is no way that your isometric strength wouldn't be even greater, you know? And let's not forget that specialization always loses to well-roundedness. And that's why these guys are not elite, even though they are very good and started from high level. So, this is, in my opinion, more fair and honest look of the dynamic versus isometric training. That it is not just one or the other. And it's not just that the other is worthless and the other is superior. Because there is all kind of things that you should consider before you exclude the dynamics entirely from your training when you think about training for arm wrestling. All right? So, just food for thought. There is no clear conclusion in this video. I'm just saying, let's not jump into conclusions here. The landscape is not that black and white. All right? That's all. Bye.
That was an interesting video, man. Tell what you think about that. Like, subscribe, support the channel. I say eccentric is king, bro. But yeah, that's me. That was an interesting video.